Ever heard of Edgar Allan Poe, the father of Gothic literature? How about Mark Twain, the author of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn? How about Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Emily Dickinson? Or let's try to go a little more contemporary. Ever heard of Stephen King, who penned the horror novel It in 1986, which was adapted into an immensely popular go-to movie in 2017? How about John Green? Does his novel The Fault in Our Stars ring a bell? Or maybe you're more familiar with Veronica Roth and her dystopian series Divergent. And I guess you also know Suzanne Collins, the person behind the Hunger Games series. Why did I drop the names of these people? Well, basically because down the core they are similar. Yes, they're all known and recognized authors in their own accord, in their respective time, genre, form, and style. But not only that they are writers and that they're the popular ones. The list of the popular writers is way too long, believe me. But down at the core, these well-recognized writers are all American. So what makes them great? Or better yet, what makes American literature so great that a lot of us read their works, their stories? For this episode, we'll briefly talk about American literature and how it paved way and became what it is right now. How did it become a powerhouse in the field of literature? But I guess to be able to answer these impending questions, the first thing to ask is this: what is American literature? American literature obviously refers to the body of literature that reflects the life and times of the people of the United States. Just like any other national literature, American literature is also honed by the history of the country where it was produced. It tells their stories and struggles, their ideals and beliefs. And the US comes with a very interesting history as well. There are many factors to consider when we talk about American history and its effect to the honing of their literature. For one, America was a group of colonies in the North American continent for almost a century. After successfully rebelling against the colonizers, the United States of America was established. From April 1861 to May 1865, the Civil War, a war between the northern and the southern part of the US, erupted, changing once again their way of life and their ideologies. This, of course, had a great impact too on their literature. After the war, the literary movement of the Americans made its ripples. This wasn't only because of the urge that probably moved the people to write during and after the war, nor only the desire to write down and share their own stories, but it was also because of the technological advancement after the Civil War in areas of transportation, communication, and the printing press. Newspapers and magazines became in demand in the 1870s as people hungered for more information. Likewise, it opened more avenue and opportunity for people to write. However, because of being colonized before, American writers strived their best to make their literature distinct from the European tradition, especially in terms of style and theme. They really strived hard to make their distinct identity, as there had been a comparison for more than a century. Still, the waves of ideas take the world all at once, and as certain ideas were espoused in Europe, so was in America. Around 1820 to 1860, the Romantic movement had made its way to the US. Romanticism is a literary movement that emphasizes the idea of beauty, emotion, subjectivity, and imagination, among others. It's a movement that generally contradicts classicism and the Enlightenment period, which on the other hand focused on rationality, order, harmony, idealization, among others. However, the Americans embraced the idea of Romanticism and branded it as their own. American Romanticism, as they call it, focused on exploring about the questions of democracy and freedom, some obvious concepts that people would talk about given their historical context. Realism is another literary movement that rose to contradict the idea of Romanticism. It's a literary movement that was brought by the war and the industrialization of the American societies after. And here, writers emphasize the need to tell realistic stories by making realistic and relatable characters who use ordinary language fitting to their social class. Characters who face real-life challenges and issues on their daily lives. One of the most popular writers of this literary period was Mark Twain. Naturalism, on the other hand, which was popularized around 1890 to 1914, is a literary movement that could be considered as an upgrade of realism, as it still honors that people should write about the reality, but is more concerned in looking at the human nature in a more scientific manner. This movement heavily borrowed its theories from that of Émile Zola, a French novelist who was also influenced by Charles Darwin. One notable American author during this literary period was Theodore Dreiser, who ventured into writing taboo topics that realists didn't dare explore. Some of the subjects under this literary movement were about prostitution, alcoholism, domestic violence, violent deaths, crime, madness, and degeneration. Modernism is a literary movement that sprung around 1914 to 1945, with the World War I and II as its biggest contributing factor, as the wars once again changed and reshaped the life and the ideologies of the people of that time. The rise of factories during the Industrial Revolution and the mass production urged by the involvement of the US in the war had made their economy boom. This boom resulted to a more elaborate and well-off living and is often called as the Jazz Age, a term popularized by the American writer F. Scott Fitzgerald. During that time, there were many literary pieces that depicted people's lives during the boom years. One example would be F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. However, the rise in the economy did not last long. A sudden collapse to the stock market led to the Great Depression, which also became a major literary theme during that time. One good example would be John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. Overall, modernism in literature refers to the innovation in form and language of literary genres, with its theme emphasizing on the contemporary issue. It sprung from the people's nonconformity to the old rules as their societies had increasingly progressed and developed as a result of the Industrial Revolution and technology. Nowadays, American literature still remains a giant in the literary world, with more and more contemporary writers sharing their words, not only to the American states, but to the world as well. It's also a country that leads when it comes to publishing, as there are various popular publishing companies that are based in the US. And again, as pointed out before, the immense opportunity provided by the World Wide Web and other digital options for literature still make the industry flourishing more than ever.